Hello and welcome to Talking Blue with the Digital Bits. I'm Tom Connors, and with me again is Tim Salmons.
Hi Tom, how's it going?
Doing the best I can, thank you very much. Hope you're doing the same. Today we're going to pick up where we left off last time with our boutique and collector's edition titles. Now another one we got from Kino that you haven't got a chance to see yet, but I have, and that is Fistful of Dollars, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't seen that disc yet. I've seen the movie, but I haven't seen the disc.
And from what I've seen, it's got a bevy of extras. I haven't got a chance to go through the disc yet. The movie itself looked okay from the transfer, but I know that you had some issues with the previous Kino release of Good, Bad, and the Ugly because the picture was a little uneven in times in the transfer and stuff like that.
The problem I have with it, and I just want to preface this by saying that their transfer of Good, and the Bad, and the Ugly is the best transfer on the market right now. That being said, it wasn't perfect. It had color timing issues, mainly. I remember I posted some screen grabs of one scene in particular where the color grading was different, completely different from shot to shot. And that was one of the main things holding it back, was the color grading. If they had that someone coming in and digitally grade it, one final pass with a digital grade, then it would have made it excel and be much better than it was. But as is, it's still a great transfer. It just needed a little more work.
Well, I think you have room to complain here, because I know you're somebody who doesn't like to complain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's cool, you like to always try to find, the bright side to everything or understand why something is the way it is.
Yeah.
And normally, like, say, 10, 20 years ago, I would have said, oh yeah, you can only accept it because it's the best they could do. But unfortunately, we live in an age where it's very easy to go in and digitally make sure everything is the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no real excuse for that, I think. And I think that's where I think you really got a good argument there, in that they should have took a little bit more time to make sure that the color timing was correct. And like I said, it's so easy now to do. I could do it with the laptop in front of me. You know what I mean? It's not that hard to do, guys. Come on. With just some standard off-the-shelf software, and the stuff they got is a lot more advanced. So there's no real excuse for that other than either negligence, or they were rushing the disc out, or somebody just wasn't doing their job and paying attention correctly. But now I can say, as far as what I watched from A Fistful of Dollars, I didn't notice any major issues like that, but I haven't seen the movie in a long time, and I don't have another copy to compare it with either.
Mm-hmm. Well, MGM put it out on Blu-ray quite a while ago, and I really don't remember what it looked like because I haven't seen it in a long time either. But to tag up on what you were saying about, there's no excuse, it may have simply been that they ran out of money and time. It may have been a situation where they just ran out of money to finish, that couldn't afford to do a full color grade on it. But, I am the kind of person that I try not to complain too much.
And I think you are stretching here to find it. Like I said, you could almost do that with over-the-shelf software. So it's kind of...
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest with you, I've just to do what we do here, I've had to find the cheapest, most, but yet decent enough ways to do stuff, and I know I could probably pull it off. So there's kind of I could probably go in and actually redo the Blu-ray itself and fix it myself. And
believe me, if I have reason enough to complain, I will complain. Like there are some releases that I've seen, and
I'm giving you a reason here.
No, I mean when it's just completely it's just completely fucked it altogether. Like there's no redeeming qualities at all. Like pretty much any transfer that Raro Video puts out on Blu-ray, that's RARO, not Kino Lorber, but Raro Video.
Right.
They egregiously erase all of the grain and detail out of their images, and they're just fucking ugly. So yeah.
And you know how much I hate that.
Yeah, I hate it too. It makes it flat. You can't see anything. It's just flat, waxy, and glossy looking, and it doesn't look like film. And that's the whole point of Blu-ray, is that to try to, and 4K as well, is to try to equal. It needs to look like a film cell, and
exactly,
what their stuff is not. Almost, at least from the ones that I've seen. There may be some out there that aren't like that, but from all the ones I've given a chance, they all look like that to me.
Well, considering most of Kino's releases, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that you may be right, that there was some circumstance they couldn't control. Yeah. But moving on.
We'll leave that alone for now.
All right. So, let's talk a little bit about Shout again, because we've got quite a bit of Shout news. Let's start off with, since we're kind of talking about seasons and stuff like that, since we just talked about Outer Limits, Mystery Science Theater 3000. I know we're both fans. They got something new coming out from the team.
Yes, they do. This is actually, it's called the Singles Collection. And I know some people that aren't as big of fans or probably don't understand what this is. What happened is, Mystery Science Theater, they did their run of shows and they would riff bad movies, but unfortunately that made it difficult to clear for home video rights. And when they were first being released through Rhino Video, it was just single discs. And that's all they could afford at the time. And then later on they started doing these box sets that had about 4 movies in each one. And eventually Rhino morphed into Shout Factory, and they retained the rights to Shout Factory, and they continued to put out the box sets and kept getting more and more rights to these movies. Well, they got all the way up to 39 volumes, and when they got to the 39th volume, they said, okay, what's left that we haven't released, that's not been released before, we can't get the rights to. They are just, the people that own them will not license them to us, so we can't put out any more volumes. But what we can do is collect the ones that have been released as singles that have never been released in any of these box sets, and that's essentially what this is, the Singles Collection. And it has The Crawling Hand, The Hellcats, Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, Ega, I Accuse My Parents, and from what I understand, this was a Mystery Science Theater fan club exclusive. It's called Shorts Volume 3, and it's just a collection of a few shorts that they riffed on the show, and they're in the shows if you want to see them, but it's just a nice little addition. And there's lots of great extras, always by Ballyhoo Motion Pictures. Daniel Griffith, he does great work. You've probably seen some of his other releases, but yeah, this is it's just nice to have these episodes back in print and in a little additional box set. And it's also going to be the case that there will probably be one more of these. There's about 3 or 4 episodes still left that haven't been released in one of these box sets, so they'll probably put out a Singles Collection Volume 2 or something like that. The episodes that they weren't able to license, at least they were able to include the live action portions of them as extras on the 39th volume. It was called Satellite Dishes.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's just all the intros, the outros, the in-betweens of all the episodes without actually showing the movies, so...
That's cool. At least you can have that. Yeah, that's cool. At least they tried that. And that's what I love about Shout, is they will go that extra mile for the fans, and they seem to always try to do the best they can, no matter what. And that's one reason why you'll rarely hear me say anything bad about Shout. So, and I know the same goes for you. So,
right.
But speaking of Shout, they have another line of films, as we brought up earlier, called Scream Factory. Now, these are some of our favorite titles, usually.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Why don't we dig into some of those?
Okay, to start us off, we're going to take a look at which this was a surprising title. I didn't know what the right situation was with this movie. It had been out on Blu-ray before, several years before, but it's called Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon, which is a great sort of anti-slasher movie, but is a slasher movie at the same time. It's part of fake documentary, and then it morphs into being actual narrative. And it's about this group of people that follow around this guy who is a serial killer. And they follow him around with a camera and talk to him and ask him questions about why he does what he does and all this stuff. And he's this really just down-to-earth guy, and he just treats it like it's just, this is just what I do. I'm just a normal guy, but I kill people, And which makes it sound like it could be goofy, but it's actually not really that goofy.
Right.
And you have this weird feeling the whole time you're watching it that this crew is going to follow around this guy and they're going to watch him kill people, but that eventually leads to the actual narrative, which turns out to be a very clever twist. And this movie is great, and it has a great transfer, a new transfer with some great extras. I believe all of them carried over from the previous DVD release. I know that when it was released on Blu-ray the first time, I think it was bare bones, or didn't have very many extras. So
I remember when it first came out. Yeah, I hadn't gotten a chance to see it yet. It's one of those movies that everybody tells me I do need to see, and I hope to get a chance to eventually here when I get the time. But yeah, I can't remember who was it who originally released it.
It was Anchor Bay, I believe.
Yeah, I was going to say I thought Starz Anchor Bay originally owned it, but even though this is a little bit newer movie, I know a lot of horror fans are big fans of this film, I've heard, so I'm glad to see it finally get a decent release.
Yeah, I am too. It's a great one, and I still feel like it's not gotten quite the amount of fandom that it deserves. It's a great little movie.
All right. So the next film I'm not too familiar with, so you're going to have to tell us a little bit about it here, but The Nightwalker is another one coming from Scream.
Yeah, we were just talking about Matinee and William Castle. This is a William Castle movie, but it's not a William Castle movie at the same. It's not his usual shtick. What it is it's basically a straight narrative based on a screenplay by Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho, and it's about this woman who is having dreams, and she's seeing this man in her dreams, and her husband, who's blind, dies in a lab explosion. He's a scientist, and she starts hallucinating, seeing him and seeing weird things in the house. So it's a great little atmospheric little movie. It's not a perfect movie, but considering the type of material that he did, where everything was surrounding a gimmick, this one's gimmick free. And it's actually pretty good and very unsung. And I was so happy when Shout Factory announced it for a Blu-ray release. It's a great little movie. And it doesn't have very many extras. It just has an audio commentary with film historian Steve Haberman. And I believe it has a trailer and a still gallery. And that's about it. But the movie itself, finally, I don't even think this... I think it got an MOD DVD release. But other than that, it hardly made it past VHS. So it was great to finally get a nice quality version of it.
Speaking of movies that have hardly gotten past VHS, ones that I haven't seen since the days of VHS and cable, the It's Alive trilogy finally made its way to Blu-ray. And this is special in many ways, and we'll get into this because I also have it and you have it. And you've seen it. I haven't got through all of it yet, but you actually got to dive into it. These transfers look beautiful, and the reason is probably because they came from Warner Brothers, correct?
That's right. The reason that Warner Brothers did the transfers for these is because these are actually Warner Brothers titles, and anybody that knows the history of Shout Factory and a lot of these other companies knows that Warner Brothers just doesn't sublicense, and they've sublicensed in special cases to Twilight Time or Criterion when the directors demanded that they sublicense certain titles for them because they wanted them out on Blu-ray. But in the case of Shout Factory, the only time they've ever been able to sublicense is they sublicensed Nightbreed, and I think mainly that was because it was owned by Morgan Creek. It was before Warner Brothers licenses to Morgan Creek titles expired, which is why a lot of the Warner Brothers Morgan Creek titles are out of print right now.
Right, I think they actually were bought by another company too, yeah.
Yeah, this one was a big deal when it was announced, because like, oh, they finally gotten access to Warner Brothers titles, and they've announced quite a few more, and but this one and another one were the two leading out the gate, and the It's Alive trilogy is really great. You know, I happen to think that the second movie is better than the first, and I think the third one is the least of the three, but they're all interesting and great little horror satire movies.
Yeah, they're a lot like in the vein of what we just brought up earlier with Basket Case, in the sense that they're really cheesy B-style horror movies, but they're really, if you love that kind of stuff, it's a haven for anybody who loves cheesy B horror movies, because this is some of the best stuff you're going to find.
Yeah, and the extras are great, and you know, we were talking about the transfers, all of them are brand new transfers, and they all look terrific, and new extras. There's a new documentary coming out called The King Cohen about the director Larry Cohen, and the guy that directed that documentary did the extras for this, including some interviews with some of the people who worked on the movies, including Larry Cohen. And these movies are pretty special, I'd say, in some of the histories of movies, and horror movies in particular. These are pretty special movies. They were all made by Larry Cohen, written, produced, and directed for the most part by Larry Cohen, and they're definitely his movies, and he's the kind of director that would like to do everything on a movie if he could, so he tries to do that, and so it has his stink, for lack of a better word, all over it. So, but these movies are great.
And for the time, the effects are actually pretty effective, even though they're really low grade, but they still are. I mean, from what I recall, even, you know, as a kid and not seeing the second and third one yet on Blu-ray, but having watched the first one, I was just impressed at how great it looked, not only in the transfer, but just how well it held up as far as the effects and stuff went.
Yeah, and part of the reason for that is because he doesn't show the monsters all that much. he's kind of got that Jaws theory where you don't see the monsters all that much, and it makes them more effective. So,
and the first one was actually made before Jaws, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was made the year before. That was what's interesting about the first It's Alive, is that it was made in '74. The people who made it at the time released it, but they released it in very few theaters, and it had a completely different marketing campaign. It didn't do all that much business, and so they pulled it. And I think it was about 3 or 4 years later. I think it was 77, 78. I think it was 77. The new head of distribution over at Warner Brothers was listening to Larry Cohen's demands about re-releasing this movie. He took a look at the movie and thought it was terrific, and they re-released it, and it became a huge hit. And they immediately wanted a sequel, so they made another sequel and released it the next year. So it's just funny that.
Yeah, I'm just flabbergasted that it got this great a treatment by Shout, and Warner Brothers was willing to start lending out some of their movies, and I can't wait to hear in the future what they've got coming for us as well.
Yeah, they've got some great stuff coming.
You had a couple more titles from Scream you wanted to talk about. One of them was called Of Unknown Origin. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, this is the other Warner Brothers title that I was referring to. This is a movie that I don't think a lot of people have seen, and you don't really get a sense of what the movie is based on the title, and I think that's why when it was released it didn't do that well. But this movie is great. This movie is like Moby Dick with rats. Basically, or a rat, I should say. It's Peter Weller.
So it's like a sequel to Ben?
Yeah. That's what's funny about it is it's lumped in with a lot of rat movies like Deadly Eyes, Ben and Willard. But it's about this businessman who has rebuilt this brownstone house for his family, and he's pretty much like a perfectionist about keeping it clean and keeping it nice looking and stuff. And he suddenly realizes that he has a rat problem, and it's one rat. And this rat just refuses to die or go away, and he goes completely nuts and just loses his moral compass when going after this rat. And
I might have seen this movie before.
Go ahead. Though. Sorry. That's cool. That's cool. By the end of the movie, he's decked out in I think he's got like hockey gear and gloves on, and he's got a baseball bat with nails hanging out of it. And it's a terrific movie, and Peter Weller is always great, but he's particularly great in this movie.
I've probably seen it in the middle of the night on cable or something. Yeah, it sounds so familiar now that you're explaining it. I'm going to have to pick that one up for sure. That sounds really good.
Yeah, it is. It's an excellent little movie, and same with the other, It's Alive. Same with It's Alive. It's got a new 2K scan from the Interpositive. It's got new interviews with some of the actors, and it's got a audio commentary with George P. Cosmatos and Peter Weller. So it's a great release. Definitely worth picking up.
So we talked a little bit about Hitchcock earlier. He keeps coming up, especially when we're talking about horror, of course, because it's Hitchcock. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about 7852 Hitchcock's shower scene.
Yeah, this is when I first heard about this, I have to say I scoffed at it. It's a documentary entirely devoted to the shower scene in Psycho, and the 78 shots and 52 cuts made in that scene. And when I heard about that, I was like, "Oh, you're kidding me! An entire documentary devoted to one scene in a movie? That's ridiculous." But then you pop it in and watch it, and then it's actually rather compelling. Really, it's like film school. They really look at it from all angles, and they really delve into it pretty thick. And it's got people like Jamie Lee Curtis, Peter Bogdanovich, Danny Elfman, Mick Garris, Elijah Wood, Oz Perkins, Anthony Perkins' son, by the way, for those who don't know. Danny Elfman, Neil Marshall. I mean, it's just got this huge cast of people talking about their love for Psycho and how how important the shower scene is in the history of movies.
Well, it is arguably probably one of the most famous scenes in not only horror films but movies in general, I suppose. So
yeah, absolutely. And I really didn't believe that you could make a compelling documentary based on that, but much to my surprise, you can. One of the interviews is with Walter Murch, and which is the extended version of that interview is included as an extra on this Blu-ray. It's like an hour long, and so is the one with Guillermo del Toro. And the guy who directed this, Alexander Philippe, if you're not familiar with him, you may be familiar with The People vs. George Lucas or Dock of the Dead, both directed by him. So this is a great little documentary, and I really highly recommend it for film nerds, especially.
I think Red Letter Media did an interview, or he was on some of their stuff before too, but yeah.
Yeah.
I recently did get to check out the Cyborg Scream Factory
Oh,
release,
yeah.
and the movie aside, the reason I wanted to get this release, and I'm glad I did, was the, how do we put this? Strange history this movie has in the industry.
I firmly believe that the history of the movie is more interesting than the movie itself.
It is, indeed, and I was just getting to that because I'm so happy to say that even though I had the previous release from MGM, I believe it was, or Fox, whoever dropped it, this was worth the extra money in buying it again because of the extras. They have tons and tons of stuff that go into everything behind the scenes, what happened, how this movie was basically born out of Spider-Man and Masters of the Universe 2, and I'm so glad they got into it. Tons of stuff I didn't even know, and I know a lot about this history of this situation because of the whole Golden Globus history and how famous they are, and there's all kinds of stuff that's I believe that's outtakes from the documentary about them that came out a couple of years ago, so there's all kinds of neat stuff to get into even without the movie. Which the movie is the movie. It's a Van Damme sci-fi strange, very early 90s action film.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you expect. You know, it hasn't changed a bit in 20 years or whatever it's been. So, I mean, it's the movie itself, like I said, take it or leave it. The extras are worth it, though, because I love all the stuff they got into, and it's definitely going to be stuff that I'll be drawing from for videos here at Midnight's Edge. So, I don't know how you feel about the film, but
I'm not the biggest Van Damme fan in the world, to be honest with you. I can appreciate the movie. I don't think it's amazing or anything like that, but I can certainly see people looking at it from a nostalgic sort of point of view, especially like I'm sure this was a big cable favorite. I'm sure this came on cable all the time.
Yeah, it was a huge video hit as well. But yeah, so if you get a chance to pick that up, if you're a fan, or if you at least are, like I said, a fan of the history of the whole thing, it's definitely worth checking out. So moving on then, let's get into one of the big companies. Speaking of Warner Brothers before, we did talk a little bit about Warner Archive on the last episodes of Talking Blu, but we're going to bring them up a little bit more here because there's a lot of titles we didn't get into there, considering all we really brought up there was Batman the Animated Series. There's been a plethora of wonderful titles come out of there, and they may be a little pricey, but Warner Brothers always does a decent transfer, even if they don't really have all the extras. Luckily, sometimes, though, they carry over some of the extras from the DVDs, and we're going to talk about a few features, and one right off the bat, something a lot of people here at Midnight's Edge, or listeners here that we have here at Midnight's Edge, probably don't know about me, besides me talking about Back to the Future. I'm a huge Michael J. Fox fan besides Back to the Future, and one of my favorite ones of his finally got its chance to be on Blu-ray, and it had been a shitty DVD for years, and I'm so glad it finally got its new transfer and is out again, and this is one I hope to pick up in the near future, and that is Doc Hollywood. I'm so happy this movie is finally out on Blu-ray.
Yeah, this one and another one that we're going to talk about in a little bit are just two, they finally did something with those movie types of releases. And yeah, this is one that I'm like you. Michael J. Fox was a big hero of mine when I was a kid, all the way up through as a teenager. Anything he was in, I watched it, so I was...
Oh, yeah, I've got just about every single movie he's made. So, yeah, there's only a few I don't have that I haven't been able to get my hands on yet. So.
Yeah, and for people who don't know what this movie is, it's basically...
Cars.
Yeah, it's basically Cars.
Cars stole this movie. I said it the first time I'm watching a movie about 20 minutes in. I'm like, this is Doc Hollywood.
It's fucking true. It really is. You watch Cars and this back to back, and you're like, it's the same fucking movie. So yeah, the movie itself. I mean, that's what it is. It's about this guy who he's a doctor, and he's going to set up a new residency in I believe it's Beverly Hills, right? Do I have that right?
Yes, I believe so. And so then just like Cars, he breaks down. And he's stuck in this town while he's waiting to get repairs done and to pay off and do all this stuff with his repairs and everything like that. Because he gets fined and everything for breaking a fence and all that stuff, so he's got to do community service. So to do his community service, he's working for the local doctor's office. So of course that's why the movie's called Doc Hollywood, because he's a Hollywood, he's going to be this big Hollywood surgeon, and yeah, he's stuck in this little podunk town. But yeah, the weird thing about this movie, though, I don't understand is, if I remember correctly, I think this movie was such a big hit. I mean, it wasn't a huge hit, but it was a big enough hit that it was one of Warner Brothers' few live action sell-through titles when it first came out. And that's why I'm surprised it hasn't gotten any love on DVD and Blu-ray since. I mean, the only DVD I remember was a bare bones full screen DVD, and I think it may have been released in one other set where it finally got a widescreen transfer, which I'm sure is the same transfer we're getting here. But of course it was only on DVD, but I can't even speak to that because I don't have that set. So that's as far as I know the history of it on home video since. But I remember when it came out, because I could have swore my aunt bought it when it came out. So that's why I was like, I thought it was a sell-through when it came out. If anybody out there knows differently, go ahead and correct me in the comments. But yeah, I do remember this being one of the other few films besides Back to the Future, Teen Wolf, and Secret of My Success that Michael J. Fox legitimately had a box office hit. So I mean, it was just weird that it feels like Warner Brothers hadn't given it any love, and now at least it's available through the Warner Archive, or you can get it through Amazon as well. So, but yeah. Go ahead and give us. I know I've talked a lot about this one, so just because I'm such a huge Michael J. Fox fan like you are, and a fan of this film. So, do you have this title?
Yeah, I have it, and I was kind of surprised when they announced it and released it that there were so many people that was a fan of this movie, because, like you said, it's just one of these movies that they'd never really given a whole lot of love to on home video, and when it got announced, there was just a flood of people that just came out of the woodwork that loved this movie. And it's unbelievable. I mean, the cast in this is unbelievable. You've got besides Michael J. Fox, you got Woody Harrelson, David Ogden Stiers, Frances Sternhagen, and you also have Julie Warner. And the scene of her coming out of the lake nude is just one of the most mouth-watering scenes I've ever seen in a movie.
For some reason, every video copy of that I rented, that scene was all garbledy-gookled. Just like...
I can't imagine why.
Just like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and the Phoebe Cates scene for some reason.
Yeah, it's weird thing that.
Yeah.
I just like to think that they're so gorgeous that they just broke the tape, but I know that's
maybe. Rewind, play, rewind. Anyways,
days before internet.
I doubt there's any extras, though, unfortunately, on the Blu-ray, being it's a Warner Archive title, but I'm just glad it's available.
All that's on there is a trailer, and it's never really had a big release. It could be one of these titles that Shout gets later on down the road for a Shout Select release. I can see that happening.
That would be definitely a great Shout Select release, yeah.
Yeah.
But moving on, another one that Warners have that actually we're kind of surprised that Shout didn't get their hands on in this situation. But hey, I'm not going to complain because we've got it finally on Blu-ray, and they actually carried over extras, except for a few. But that is Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3.
Yes. This is one that... I don't know if a lot of modern horror fans have seen many of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies past the first and second one, other than like the remakes that they did. 3 is pretty brutal, and it's actually pretty great. It's one of the last really great ones of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series, and it wasn't considered that at the time at all. There were so many people that came out of the woodwork when this movie was going to be released, and it was just reviled by hardcore Texas Chainsaw Massacre fans. And how dare you try to do this and all that stuff, And I think the second one got a pass because Tobe Hooper directed the second one too, but Tobe Hooper didn't have anything to do with the third one. So
yeah, I personally like the second one a lot, but yeah.
Yeah, like the second one is really great. The second one is great, and I think this one is really underappreciated.
Right, I like this one for the same kind of reasons, but because it's different. I guess I don't know how to explain it. It's weird because this movie kind of takes it a little bit back, like you said, more to the original horror elements, but it also adds that 80s slasher kind of thing to it, and the two just kind of hit head on like a semi-truck, and it's just a bloody mess.
Yeah, it really is. And thankfully for all of us, Warner Archive chose to do a transfer of the unrated version of the movie. And the unrated version of the movie is not really, it's not that much longer than the original R-rated version. It's a matter of like a minute or two, something like that. But some of the kills were pretty censored in the R-rated version, the original theatrical version, from my memory of the movie. But yeah, they carried over pretty much all of the main extras from the previous DVD release that New Line did in the early 2000s.
Now they just give us Jason Goes to Hell, but yeah.
yeah. The only thing they didn't include was the original R-rated version, which I understand why they didn't do that, and that's fine.
Right.
But it's nice to have the unrated version in such great quality. And I do think, it may be another one of those titles that Shout gets their hands on 2 or 3 years down the road now that they're if they continue to sub-license from Warner Brothers, if it continues to be something that that company wants to do with them, then absolutely.
I'm sure there's a lot of goodies to dig into that haven't been released yet, so that's something we can look forward to. And then they can also release the R-rated version at the same time, which they generally like to do. So, moving on though, to change a little bit of tone, back to comedy. Joe versus the Volcano is another title that Warner Brothers Archive has. I remember seeing this when I was younger. I haven't seen it in many, many, many years, but I do know this is another one, kind of like Doc Hollywood and The Burbs that we brought up before, that are fairly popular films among the general audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me in particular, me and people are familiar with Michael Felsher. Me and him got into a quoting war one night on Facebook over this movie. He loves this movie, and so do I. I think this movie is just beautiful. It's such a whimsical movie, but it's not so whimsical that you can't take it seriously. It's like a fairy tale is the best way to describe it. It's like a whimsical fairy tale. And Tom Hanks, and this, in my opinion, this is the best movie that Meg Ryan has ever been in. I like her in this movie more than I've ever liked her in any other movie.
I don't care for her much, but yeah, she's got a few movies that I'll tolerate with her.
I'm on the same boat, as I don't care much for Meg Ryan in movies, but she's wonderful in this movie. She plays 2 or 3 different characters, and it's the movie, for those who don't know, this movie stars Tom Hanks as Joe. And Joe is kind of a deadbeat loser who goes to his job every day, and he's kind of given up on everything, and he finds out that he's going to die. He goes to the doctor, and the doctor tells him that he has something that's inoperable, that can't be cured, and that he's gonna die within, I think they gave him like 6 months or something like that, if I remember right. And a guy comes to him offering, and on the behalf of this group of natives that are way out on an island in the middle of the ocean, and they need to appease their god by having a human sacrifice into a volcano, and the guy offers him the job to do this, and Joe just agrees to it. And along the way, he meets Meg Ryan 3 times. One of the girls that he works with is Meg Ryan. Another girl that he works with is Meg Ryan, and then another girl that he meets later on, who ends up being his love interest, is Meg Ryan. And the movie is basically a fairy tale about a guy just learning that he doesn't want to die. Basically, and it's hard to talk about this movie without spoiling the ending. But it's just a whimsical, wonderful movie that I love this movie, and I was so happy that it finally got a nice Blu-ray release. The only extras on it is a behind-the-scenes documentary, a trailer, and a music video. But I know that Michael Felsher has said that if Shout ever gets this one, he really wants to work on the extras for it because he loves this movie.
I can imagine. And this is a weird one because, much like many of the ones we've talked about on this list, I remember it having a huge media blitz when it came out, and it didn't do too well in the box office.
No.
But then it became a huge favorite on video and on cable. Like I said, like a lot of these movies we keep bringing up. It's just weird. But it's, again, I'm just so surprised Warner hasn't put this out there in a normal standard release, but... All right, so we're going to cut it short here, and we'll have more on the next episode. Hopefully you can join us for that real soon. I want to thank Tim for joining me here.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be here.
And be sure to check out thedigitalbits.com, where you can keep up to date on all your home media news and reviews. Speaking of reviews, Tim has a few reviews right now over on our sister channel, Midnight's Edge After Dark. He's doing some Blu reviews for you guys, so be sure to check those out. We'll have the links down below. And be sure to join us again next time, where we've got a ton of Shout Factory titles to go over, including some new announcements as well. So until then, thanks for joining us here on Talking Blu with the Digital Bits here on Midnight's Edge.
If you like this video, then please click the subscribe button. And don't forget to click the bell icon to be notified for all the latest uploaded content. Due to recent changes to YouTube's monetization policies, we'd also like to ask you to please consider supporting Midnight's Edge and its sister channel, Midnight's Edge After Dark, through Patreon. As thanks for their support, patrons will receive early notifications of mini-documentaries, special behind-the-scenes Making of the Edge videos, bloopers, outtakes, lost episodes, and more. You can support the channel for as little as $1 a month. Be sure to check back for news and analysis on the corporate politics behind your favorite genre movies, as well as updates and discussion here at Midnight's Edge.